Well, people living in the biblical eras were engulfed in a natural world of inky black skies that were filled with a billion lights of hope, hope for a better reality twinkling just beyond the veil. I think those ancient people would recognize and share our awe at images from the Hubble and Webb space telescopes. But I am also amazed by an aspect of reality our biblical ancestors could never see, although they did imagine its existence, and that's the quantum world, the universe inside our physical world. Our ability to peer deeply into the molecular construct of everything physical would shock our ancestors, and I think it might also inspire them with the intimate and very physical understanding of God that Jesus was trying to explain and show. Quantum physics is the study of the smaller than the small. The Marvel Ant-Man movies take place in the quantum universe, which has a very specific set of laws that differ from our macroscopic world. And the fact that movies like the Ant-Man series make millions of dollars shows that contemplating the infinitesimal is as spiritually normal for us as considering the starlight was for our ancestors. There are now hundreds of books available about quote-unquote quantum spirituality, though most of the ones that I've seen have little to do with either, unfortunately. But I do think quantum spirituality is a good descriptor for the attitude of many people today. The quantum world undeniably reveals the interconnection of all beings. At the quantum level, we are all entangled, every molecule with every other. We humans all, of every creed and ethnicity and sexual orientation and gender identity and everything, we are all woven together by quantum forces that the more spiritually attuned of us readily recognize as the energy of God, perhaps even the very being of God. When we peer into the molecular Legos that build everything physical from pure energy, what our spiritual forebears presciently called spirit, we begin to understand what Jesus was saying about God within and among us. Consequently, we begin to treat each other the way Jesus treated everyone, with unconditional love and particular concern for the people discarded by systemic prejudice, an unfortunately ancient issue. Jesus saw past prejudices because he was in complete harmony. He was at one with God. He vibrated with God and understood that everyone, everything is also vibrating with God. He understood that we are entangled naturally. The normalization of quantum language in mass media helps us understand Jesus' sense of oneness. The quantum world reveals that everything physical is an assemblage of unimaginably small bits of vibrating energy. The chairs you're sitting on, your clothes, your dogs and cats, trees, rocks, water, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, this hair follicle that we are digging ever deeper into this video here, it's all made of atoms. There they are. But that is not even as wondrously small as God gets. Atoms contain electrons, neutrons, and protons, and those elements consist of even smaller bits called quarks and muons. Those already unimaginably tiny bubbles of matter are made of even more ridiculously small things until eventually we get to vibrating strings of pure energy, the pure energy of God. The flower power children of the 60s were correct about vibrations. Reality exists because everything is buzzing with God energy. Quintillions of little vibrations are singing us into being. And if we think about that for a moment, that's why we feel comfortable or uncomfortable around certain people, because we're tuning into each other. Tuning into the interconnecting thread of God activates our instinct. It's why we have sudden affinities for so-called strangers, an idea that we discover is a myth because we're never strangers when we recognize we're all aspects of one giant vibration. We should buzz every time we meet anyone because everyone is an aspect of ourselves. We're not strangers at all. We're one consciousness. Once we grasp the implication of every human as the energy of the entire conscious universe, well, hopefully we see each other much more inclusively. We understand being human as a worthy, unique undertaking of God, and we see that the people that make us uncomfortable do so because we can sense their disconnection. And when we are too disconnected from God, we're capable of atrocious acts. Still, if we do the hard work of spiritual awakening, and it is work, then we see that God powers everyone. Yes, even the people you're thinking of right now that you can't stand. Listen, just because God is the source of all being doesn't mean all being acts with the righteousness of God. I mean, part of the maddening beauty of being human is understanding that we have this ultimate love within us, but we won't let it out. In part, I think, because we're afraid of losing our individuality. Individualism is a construct perpetuated by the ego anyway. We're not any more individual than ants, and at least ants understand that they'll thrive or die together. That's more than I can say about humankind most of the time. However, when we do occasionally recognize each other as electrons orbiting God, the fundamental engine of creation, we cannot resist opening our hearts, souls, pocketbooks, churches, mosques, synagogues, government buildings, cities, and countries to anyone and everyone in need, no questions asked, no papers required, no excuses acceptable. Once we have a God experience that convinces us that every human being is worth love and respect, that every human deserves housing and health care and education, then for us to say there's no room at the inn is to ignore the empty manger in the backyard. And every city in America is full of empty mangers. But we don't fill them with the unhoused and the hungry, with refugees and immigrants, because, unfortunately, we value real estate more than real people. This is a fundamental flaw in human thinking, one that Jesus tries to correct by waking us to the truth of being human. It is a shared experience in a singular consciousness of God. The Jesus that I've come to love teaches us that everything is one, because he understands that God is not a separate alien being up in the sky somewhere, but instead that God is the invisible thread holding it all together. Jesus says we should consider being human a profoundly wonderful, awe-inspiring experience. He never says we're worthless or undeserving. Jesus knows that when we look into each other's souls, we should be as overwhelmed with awe of God's presence as we are when we look at the starlight-infused night sky, or looking through a scanning, tunneling microscope into the quantum weirdness that is the foundation of all reality. The quantum world reveals that we are spirit having a physical moment. And importantly, we are the same spirit having many individuated experiences. We are not separate spirits having isolated moments. We are never isolated. There's only one spirit, the universal energy of God, and we are all directly harmonized within that God energy, the fundamental frequency of all realities, singing us lovingly into being. And I have to say, knowing all of that fills me with as much awe as that inky black star-filled night sky. Amen. Our question today is, how does thinking of humanity as a collective consciousness influence your thoughts about God? What about society? How does thinking of humanity as a collective consciousness influence your thoughts about God and about society? If you'll give me one moment, I'll get breakout rooms together.